Hello, true believers, and welcome back to another episode of TV Report Tuesday, where we're going over another X-File. Hit the theme song.
Presenting your host, Cuddy Vibe.
Very nice. Now, we're going to be doing something a little different this episode from the last episode. It's the early days of covering the X-Files, so, I'm trying to experiment a little bit, see what works, see what doesn't. So we're trying a new structure this week for our X-Files coverage, where I'm only going to go over one episode, and then we're going to cover the surrounding mythology around it. The surrounding mythology, conspiracy, the X-Files actually seems to cover a pretty wide range of supernatural phenomenon, so it'll be fun to probably explore a whole bunch of these different cases and see if they're real. I don't know. Are the X-Files a real thing? I'm going to include that. Hey, editing Cody, just include the answer, please. Pretty please. Thank you. All right, folks. So anyway, for the first half of the episode, we still need to do what we do best here, and that's cover a complete episode of The X-Files. So this week's episode is Episode 4, Conduit. Ahem. Cold open. We open on some really dark woods. At a campsite, two children sleep next to an active fire, something folks at home should not try. Suddenly, the campground begins to shake. A bright light appears outside the family's camper, which the mom has for some reason forced the kids to sleep outside of, a decision that becomes obnoxiously stupid when the girl is kidnapped. Her name is Ruby, and the mom tries to make up for her irresponsibility by screaming it into the darkness. And that takes us out of the cold open into Act 1. Act 1. J. Edgar Hoover Building. The Baldies are talking with Scully about a request Mulder made to investigate a tabloid headline of the actual horrific kidnapping we just saw with our own two eyes in the cold open. For some reason, the higher-ups are suspicious of Mulder acting exactly like he has his entire career. The Baldies then show Scully the X-File of Mulder's sister, which Mulder actually submitted in trying to get approval for the investigation. Clearly, this is personal, which the Baldies are trying to use as a reason of denying Mulder ability to access the investigation, despite his repeated correctness on basically every case. Back at their basement, Scully asks Mulder why he's so keen to investigate this particular case, and he tells her about a string of UFO sightings at the site LAKE Okooboji, which, wouldn't you know it, is actually exactly where the mom was that we saw in that camper earlier in her life when her Girl Scout troop got abducted. Ba, ba, ba! Mission approved. Iowa is where Darlene Morris lives. That's the mom, and apparently they just go up to this woman's house and she lets them in. She invites them in, apparently eager for someone to ask her and hear her story, which no one ever seems to take seriously for some reason. Right before she's about to tell it, she introduces Scully and Mulder to her remaining child, a young boy named Kevin, who's blonde and can't stop watching the static on the television. When Mulder talks to the kid a little bit more, he ends up discovering that this kid is writing in binary code. But as this kid is being sus as all heck, Mulder is too busy walking around the living room, reminding himself of how his sister was abducted by staring at pictures of the recently kidnapped girl, Darlene's daughter. Talk about unresolved family trauma. Yeesh. Finally, Darlene gets done with the tea. The tea is finally ready. Darlene pours everybody a cup, and Scully pointedly asks about Darlene's ex-husband, but Darlene says it wasn't him because she remembers the same phenomenon back when her Girl Scout troop got abducted. Mulder brings it up, and then they ask her to talk to Darlene's weird traumatized kid, Kevin, who's in the living room watching static on the television. He tells Mulder he's recently been having nightmares, and Mulder notices that Kevin is writing binary code on paper you and I would use to draw dragons. He tells Mulder it's coming from the TV. The binary code is coming from the TV. What's wrong with this kid? Later, Mulder faxes the code to a friend at the bureau as local PD is talking to Scully, telling her Ruby has actually run away multiple times. And they're using this, apparently, as justification to not suspect that aliens might have been doing this all along. Shocker! Mulder nearly gets into a fight with the local Blue, who start going off on how Ruby had it coming, which is like, yeah, I trust you to protect the community. Not. As they leave the precinct, they find a note on their car and follow a mysterious girl into a library who tells Scully and Mulder Ruby was supposed to meet with Greg that night she disappeared because Greg got her pregnant. Oh, Greg's her boyfriend. Greg's Ruby's biker boyfriend, apparently, who works at a bar. You know, gross, Greg. Keep it in your pants. Greg works at the Pennsylvania pub. Obviously, Mulder can't resist a pub in the middle of a workday. At the pub, the bartender tells Mulder Greg hasn't been seen or heard from in 3 weeks. Mulder notices the bartender has a UFO tattoo. Mulder makes fun of him for believing in aliens. Classic Mulder. At which point, the bartender brags about how a UFO nearly burned off his ear at Lake Okeboji and invites Mulder for a ride with his biker gang? Act 2! Act 2! Act 2! It's 5:30 a.m. at the dirt cheap hotel the government is putting Scully and Mulder up at. Scully wakes up to shadows outside her window as someone tries to open her door. Naturally, she reaches for her gun, but the shadows are too quick. They kick her door down. Repairs, I assume, the government is prepared to pay for. Cut to a shirtless Mulder being asked about the binary code he faxed to his friend earlier, which apparently translates to highly classified defense transmissions written by a child named Kevin, who I don't like. I think that this is evidence that refutes the notion that TV is rotting our brains, by the way. Naturally, these guys are eager to figure out where it came from. They leave, and Mulder scolds Scully for deciding to tell the NSA about an 8-year-old boy who Scully thinks could be a legitimate threat to national security. Later that day, the NSA rifles through the child's room and separate Kevin from his mother. Scully watches this with utter indifference as Mulder sarcastically compliments the NSA thugs on destroying a once charming family home. While looking at the camper from the second story, Mulder notices that the whole top is singed. Back at headquarters, Scully and Mulder talk to people decoding Kevin's binary code to discover that when decoded, the binary actually translates to languages, double helixes, and great works of art. Later, Mrs. Morris and her son Kevin, who I still don't like, are leaving NSA detention, as Scully and Mulder approach them to try and convince the mom to let them talk to her son. Obviously, she declines. Good mom. Later, as Mulder is driving Scully somewhere, he explains that Kevin might be a conduit for whatever took Ruby. Scully points out that there is no evidence of abduction, which is why Mulder says they're driving to investigate the crime scene. Good on you, Mulder. Keep it up. At the crime scene, Mulder finds that glass has solidified on the beach, and that treetops have been burnt, indicating some source of extreme heat. At that point, an albino wolf walks out of the tree line. Mulder and Scully follow the wolf to its pack, which is currently digging up a shallow grave. Mulder begins to dig it up before Scully stops him from disturbing a crime scene. Behavior I'm used to at this point. Act 3. Hours have passed. The crime scene is finally filled out. Coroners, tape guys, photographers. They ID the body as Ruby's biker boyfriend, Greg, and the sheriff thinks it's appropriate to say that Ruby had a lot of boyfriends. It's not appropriate to say that, Sheriff. Mulder gets his hands on a note from the crime scene and discovers it has the same handwriting as the note they got out in front of the library. The mysterious girl's name is Tessa, and upon discovering who she is, Mulder and Scully pull her in for interrogation. Scully threatens Tessa with a charge of perjury. Then she starts talking about how Greg promised to take her to Cali. Turns out, Tessa was actually the one that was having Greg's baby. Tessa denies going to the lake to kill Greg, but Mulder immediately accuses her of killing Ruby. Tessa then thinks she's winning when she says Ruby wasn't even there that night, implying that she did in fact kill Greg. Scully and Mulder are talking after. Scully is pleased with Tessa's confession, but Mulder won't let the case go, at which point Scully tells Mulder to stop chasing his sister, proving she's not only capable of gun violence, but also emotional violence. Mulder tells Scully to come with him or not, and says he's not stopping until he's found Ruby's dead body. This brings them back to the Morris home, where Mulder finds more of the binary code, and Scully finds tea on the stove. Fresh, hot, not being drinking. No one is at the home for whatever reason. Scully looks around a house to see if anyone's home. When Scully goes up to the second floor, she ends up looking at all of the binary code on the floor of the living room, and finds that Kevin has actually articulated his own sister's face, which is kind of sweet for siblings. I know I couldn't do that for my brother. Act 4. We reopen on Mulder and Scully driving back to Lake Okoboji, searching for the missing Morrises. While in the car, Mulder tells Scully of a very concerning recurring dream he has. His story is interrupted when they find Morris's camper. Scully and Mulder run out into the woods to find a winded Darlene saying she saw them, but couldn't keep up with them. And Kevin's with them, supposedly. Mulder runs after Kevin to find him walking towards a bright light in the woods. Not the first time we've seen this in this show, and not the last. When Mulder catches up, it's revealed that the light is actually Greg's biker gang, riding their hogs at night. Kevin says he can feel Ruby in the woods, which, go figure. Scully discovers Ruby's unconscious body. She was just there. She just showed up again, I guess. Okay. Kind of convenient show. You know, bad writing. Bad writing. At the hospital, Mulder points out to Scully that Ruby's body is exhibiting signs of prolonged weightlessness. How nice. When Ruby wakes up, Scully and Mulder ask Ruby where she was, at which point Ruby says, "They told me not to say," which could mean anything. Darlene confronts Scully and Mulder. She says she'd appreciate it if everybody forgets this happened. Mulder says it's important she shares, and Darlene says that sharing this story will only bring Ruby ridicule. In order to save Ruby embarrassment, Darlene says she's going to say Ruby spent a month on the back of a Harley Davidson, which arguably is not much better. To end the episode, Scully listens to some recordings of Mulder reliving the day his sister was kidnapped in hypnosis like any stable person would. Thank you. That concludes the summation part of the video. Now we're moving on to the X-File investigation. Dun dun. Alright, so with the story of the episode concluded, let's move into our research portion of the video, where first, because this is our first time doing this, a little information about the X-Files is that they don't formally exist. However, the CIA and a number of other intelligence agencies do have files which describe unexplained phenomenon. So, and they've released a bunch of these files before. If you actually look it up on the internet, there will be pretty much immediately at the top of your search results, likely a CIA website, which will actually point you to a number of released files, which, who knows, maybe it would be fun to go over at some point. And these files actually reference, well, at least the description of these files reference the X-Files. So, this show has, you know, kind of inspired even the CIA to have some fun. Shocker. Actually, I think the CIA has a lot of fun, to be honest. I don't think it's the good kind of fun, but, you know, they keep on keeping on, and we'll keep on keeping on as well. So, yeah, the X-Files don't actually formally exist as far as we know, but there are certainly files about phenomena that we can't explain, and the CIA can't explain, and so something's out there. We still don't know everything, which is cool. I think that's cool. I think it's cool not to know everything. It makes it feel like we have more runway to sprint down or whatever. So this episode of the X-Files is largely based around Lake Okoboji, which the episode doesn't spell correctly. The episode spells Lake Okoboji, Okobogee, when the actual spelling of Lake Okoboji goes more like Okoboji. Shame on you! And so the first thing that I really started with when researching this episode was the history of Lake Okoboji. So this is the history according to the city's official website, okobojicity.com. Naturally, the website doesn't really touch on a lot of the native activity prior to 1857. The source actually begins with a description of a massacre or killing done by the native Sioux tribe, who either killed or abducted, according to the source. We don't know whether these people were killed or abducted. The native Sioux tribe apparently killed or abducted 33 pioneer settlers. Oh no! You know, obviously, these settlers killed way more of the native Sioux tribe. So I have a hard time feeling bad, if, you know, that makes sense. And if it doesn't, sorry, I guess I'm too bad a person for you. So anyway, this becomes known as the Spirit Lake Massacre, which actually ends up motivating a detachment of soldiers from Fort Dodge to brave the wintry conditions so that they could come up to Lake Okoboji and massacre the Sioux. Woo! Yay! Thanks, soldiers. And one of the early draws to Lake Okoboji was the fishing. Apparently there was no regulation for fishing at the time, which means that upon the discovery of Lake Okoboji, it was open season on all the fish in the lake. Now, the name Okoboji is actually appropriated from the Dakota natives who once called the lake Okoboji. Okoboji. The spelling should be on the screen right now. And much like an American with Chinese characters tattooed onto their bicep, we're not exactly sure what Okoboji really means today. A professor named T.H. McBride, says it means place of rest. The Dakota natives actually translate Okoboji to mean, and there are others. So that makes sense because Lake Okoboji is kind of around a bunch of other lakes, so that name makes sense. I supporting Dakota natives tribes account of the naming of Lake Okoboji. So I'm not gonna favor Professor McBride's account. Who cares? Who cares what he has to say? Shut up. This is not your place. And honestly, I like "and there are others" as a name more than I like "place of rest." That's so basic. Get less basic, McBride, and then maybe I'll listen to you. But anyway, the community began to really form around 1870 to 1890, where the Okoboji begins to, construct its first church and mills, the first bank, and a couple other commercial establishments. The city is officially incorporated in 1922, and by 1930 it had a population of 176. The city's website really didn't have anything beyond this kind of early developmental period, and quite frankly I was running out of time, so I didn't look more into recent history of the Okoboji region. I believe it's in Dixon County, which is important to bring up for our next source, which is Axios Des Moines. This website apparently was tracking UFO sightings from 2000 to 2003, and there should be a little map that pops up right here. Okay, this map has all of the UFO sightings in Iowa, apparently from 2000 to 2023. So the county that we're really looking for is Dixon County. That's where Lake Okoboji is. That's where the nearest city to Okoboji, Milford, is. And this is really where the UFO sightings count for us when we look at Lake Okoboji and how many UFOs we've seen. As I hope I stated earlier, the big kind of thing going on in this episode is Ruby getting abducted by UFOs, which Mulder claims are a pretty regular sighting at Lake Okoboji. But if we actually look at Axios, at least from 2000 to 2003, who knows? Maybe the site was way more active back in the 90s, back when X-Files was being released. But yeah, recently there have only been 7 sightings in the whole county between 2000 and 2003, which is somewhat notable. But even so, when you actually look at one of the accounts, because I did search further, this website lets you search further, so 7 accounts of UFO sightings in this one county. There are about 1,200 in the entire state of Iowa, which I suppose is pretty significant. I don't really know what the numbers are across the country, but here in Dixon County, there were only 7. When I zoomed in more and searched up sightings around Milford, which is the kind of town immediately next to Lake Okoboji from the map that I put up earlier, yeah, there are only 3 accounts I could figure out that I could find in the listed reports from Axios. That and one account is from 2023, which was actually debunked. So in that account, I guess somebody saw, a white orb floating, not really moving all that much in the sky. So that was a planet. The next account near Milford happens in 2001, and that I kind of didn't even read it because it happened, 20 some odd years ago. And then the other account was actually from 1994, which is the year immediately after this episode would have released. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, the one account that we have that's the most recent has been debunked as a planet, I suppose. So there really haven't been a whole lot of UFO sightings, especially relative to Iowa. If you're looking at this map correctly, you'll understand there are actually other counties in Iowa which are much more, you're much more likely to see a UFO sighting in. Dixon County is really not that relevant when it comes to UFO sightings. So with this in mind, it kind of seems like the whole UFO thing is a bit of a stretch, but because I know you're watching this and I know you're interested to some certain extent in hearing about the paranormal and the unusual. This is not to say that Lake Okoboji has no significant folklore or weird occurrences that have been reported in Lake Okoboji, around Lake Okoboji. The thing is that they're just really not all that concerned with UFOs. So this is according to the Cryptids fandom wiki, so take it how you will. Not a great source, not a perfect source, and certainly not anything you should take full on for its word. But according to Cryptids fandom wiki, Lake Okoboji may be home to an aquatic dragon. Iowa was historically inhabited by the Algonquin native tribes, one of which included the Miskowi, who spoke of an aquatic dragon, understood by the natives to be a mythological creature whose likeness was a cross between a dragon and a panther. This creature was dangerous because it apparently liked to drag people underwater, and especially people who were trying to transport copper. Before any official documented sightings, there were apparently a number of stories about people trying to travel Lake Okoboji whose boats got overturned with a bunch of copper in it, and some people died. Some people have apparently claimed that this was done by this aquatic dragon. However, those are our unofficial accounts, and probably the most interesting, but that's not going to keep us from going through our less interesting official counts, according to Cryptid's Fandom Wiki, which, that's about as official as we get here. It's really not. There are some. I look for more sources. I try to find better sources than this, but I'm running low on time here. What can I say? So our first official sighting for the underwater panther dragon comes from Mr. and Mrs. Charles Bartlett, who reportedly saw the thing in 1903. According to the couple's account, the water dragon was splashing around and making waves so big that their boat nearly capsized. So apparently the couple fled the boat before it could capsize, and as they were running away, apparently Mr. Charles Bartlett saw what appeared to be some kind of aquatic dragon. But, it sounds like the waves were also pretty big, so who's to say? Who's to say? Our second official account comes actually nearly 100 years later, if you'd believe it or not, in 2001, and it goes something like this. A woman and her 2 kids were staying at a lake resort with a deck, and one day they were chilling on said deck when the family all saw a large humped body about 5 feet long. The creature apparently looked like a cross between a lizard and a horse, and swam at the dock with its mouth open, according to the family, before going back underwater, which caused the mother and her family to run away. So, that's what we actually kind of, that's folklore that we can, see people kind of more participating in. The UFO sightings is a little bit of a stretch for really popular folklore for this area, and, it's just a little bit of a letdown that we could have gotten a aquatic dragon, which was a cross between a lizard, a panther, and a horse, and instead we got, more UFO stuff from the UFO show. But, hey, they can't all be winners, and, what are you gonna do? There are gonna be a couple of quick mentions here, which just popped up in the AI overview that Google refuses to shut off. The first one is Mary Jane's grave, which apparently there's a grave somewhere in Iowa. And if you jump over the grave 3 times, your death will soon follow. So that's a fun thing. Keep a lookout for it if you're near Okoboji. The second folklore little urban legend is actually it's called the Okoboji Death, and it's a collection of urban legends about unexpected tragedies passed down by summer residents of Lake Okoboji. So if you know any of those, I'd be very interested in hearing them, actually. That sounds kind of fun. And the last little bit of folklore is apparently the Legend of the Queen, which was a famous excursion boat and continues to serve as a sort of living legend site today. So if you're around Okoboji, maybe consider checking out the Queen 2. I think that's the name of the boat. The most compelling connection this episode has to any of the folklore and history surrounding Lake Okoboji is probably its seemingly coincidental connection to the Spirit Lake Massacre. Both situations in this instance appear to have mystery around some kind of disappearance of a large group of people. In the X-Files episode, it's this Girl Scout troop that goes missing, and in our actual history of the event, it's these 33 pioneer settlers who go missing, who are, we end up saying that the Sioux tribe is responsible for their disappearance. This is really the most compelling connection, I would say, that the episode seems to have with any legitimate historical or folklore that surround Lake Okoboji, and this seems to be more or less wholly coincidental, as the Girl Scout troop isn't really a big part of the episode necessarily, and obviously there's no mention of this native attack at any point in the episode, So there's really no reason to think that this episode was in any way trying to comment on the massacre of Spirit Lake. The UFO connection is incredibly slim to non-existent. I found no evidence that would indicate Okoboji to really be a hotspot for UFOs. And from what I was able to find out about the area, it would appear that the more precise example about folklore related to Lake Okoboji would actually be the underwater dragon / aquatic horse panther lizard. This investigation officially classifies Season 1, Episode 4 of The X-Files to be utter nutter butter. No shot, no way. In the show, Mulder is right on the money, but in the real world, he'd be crazier than a jackrabbit on a Segway. So, thank you for watching, as always. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. And I hope you'll consider subscribing. We got a lot of fun things planned for the channel, and it would suck for you to miss out. So, thank you for watching, especially if you made it all the way through. Please consider hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and leave a comment, right? I worked hard to make this video, and a comment would be nice. You know, even if it's just well wishes. Say whatever you want in the comments. All right, we'll see you tomorrow for Why Wednesday, where we talk about, we ask the question, the important question: why don't Americans, by and large, believe in the climate crisis? What's up with that? All right, everybody, have a good night, have a good morning, have a good day, whatever the heck you're doing, go do it, have fun.